It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. NATO hits back at Donald Trump, accusing him of putting soldiers' lives at risk after controversial comments about Russia and defence spending. Growing international pressure on Israel over its planned military operation in Rafah, as Prime Minister Netanyahu says it will go ahead. Labour stands by a by-election candidate who's apologised for completely wrong comments about Israel. Dozens of new allegations of sexual assault on mental health wards after an investigation by Sky News and The Independent. Also coming up, how the UK is preparing for America's biggest sporting spectacle, the Super Bowl. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. The head of NATO has issued a rare rebuke to Donald Trump for suggesting he would let Russia attack members of the alliance who don't pay enough for defence. Mr. Trump, who's the leading candidate for the Republican presidential nomination, suggested that NATO members who didn't meet their defence spending commitments of 2% of GDP were delinquent and should not be protected. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner reports.
He's back on the campaign trail and in a familiar rhythm. Donald Trump's strongman America First act, which plays so well to his Conservative base, is in full flow. Here, making explicit threats to smaller NATO countries.
One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills.
It is an invitation to Russia and its President Vladimir Putin to expand the boundaries of his war in Ukraine. In Kharkiv, where 7 were killed in this drone attack, and across NATO-allied countries, they know they have to take his words seriously. Because if Donald Trump is elected president in November, he could, some believe, withdraw from the alliance altogether. Robert Bell, a former US defence advisor to NATO in both Obama and Trump administrations, says Trump must be taken at face value.
To have a former American president say that he would encourage Russia to invade any NATO ally that's not at 2%. Is beyond reckless. It's despicable.
Do Donald Trump's comments put soldiers on the ground in Ukraine at risk?
Yes.
The NATO spending dispute is over an unofficial commitment for members to spend 2% of their economic output on defence, which some have failed to meet.
I think what we're seeing from Trump, future potential President Trump here, is a very clear message to European nations that they need to meet the guidelines for NATO defence spending.
Mr. Trump's comments come at a perilous time for Ukraine, with future US support uncertain. Republicans in Congress are pushing back against more aid for their war against Russia. But NATO reiterated its support for member nations. In a statement, Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said, any suggestion that allies will not defend each other undermines all of our security, including that of the US, and puts American and European soldiers at increased risk. For 74 years, NATO has been the United States' key military alliance. But Donald Trump has a long-held view that it's a drain on American resource by freeloaders. If elected, he could be about to rip it up.
Well, Martha joins us live now from Los Angeles. Martha, what has been the reaction in the United States to this argument, this spat, really?
As you might expect, Gillian, the White House and President Biden have seen this as something of a campaigning opportunity. They say to highlight what they call Donald Trump's foreign policy failings. There was a statement earlier today from a President Biden spokesperson saying his comments were appalling and unhinged, and saying that rather than calling for wars and promoting deranged chaos, that President Biden will instead stand up for the US's national security interests. Just in the last hour or so, we have a statement as well from President Biden himself saying that Donald Trump, with these comments, is giving a green light for Putin to expand his aggression to the people of Poland and other Baltic states. For what it's worth, Vladimir Putin gave his first interview for some time to a Western journalist this week in Moscow. He spoke to the right-wing US commentator Tucker Carlson, and he said he has no interest in a wider war, no interest in expanding his war in Ukraine to neighbouring countries, for whatever that is worth. But President Biden saying that this is an incredibly dangerous moment, saying that Donald Trump's statements are irresponsible. So there could be seismic changes ahead for NATO if Donald Trump is elected later this year.
OK, Martha, thank you. The US president has this evening added his voice to growing international concern about Israel's planned military offensive in the densely populated Gaza border town of Rafah. Joe Biden has warned Benjamin Netanyahu not to go ahead without a credible plan to protect civilians. The Israeli Prime Minister has dismissed concerns from allies, including the UK, insisting an evacuation plan is being prepared for people sheltering in the last of the designated safe zones. Well, Rafah is Gaza's most southern city, situated on the border with Egypt, and is one of the few areas not yet targeted by the Israeli ground offensive. The city is providing refuge to more than half of Gaza's population who've fled fighting elsewhere, with an estimated 1.4 million people sheltering there. Sky's Diana Magne reports from Jerusalem.
Soldiers from Israel's Givati Brigade on the ground in Khan Yunis. Close quarters combat, delicate and dangerous. The IDF says it's going well, but it's not done yet. 100 Hamas militants killed in recent weeks here, as many as 2,500, the IDF says, since the war began. This as Hamas claims that Israeli strikes over the last 4 days have resulted in the deaths of 2 more hostages, with 8 more injured. But Israel has made its course abundantly clear that the only way to bring the hostages home is to keep up the military pressure. Now the focus turns to Rafah. The 4 Hamas battalions hold up beneath, and half of Gaza's population crammed into this small patch of land right up against the border with Egypt. Israel is facing considerable international pressure to keep civilians safe as it prepares to launch its Rafah operation.
Here is my child, only 2 months old. Where do we take him? I swear by God, I don't know where to take him. Where do we go with 4 people? We don't know if we should leave or stay. We move from one place to another.
But Israel's Prime Minister says evacuation back to the north is possible.
The areas that we've cleared north of Rafah, plenty of areas there, but we're working out a detailed plan to do so. And that's what we've done up to now. We're not cavalier about this. This is part of our war effort to get civilians out of harm's way. It's part of Hamas's effort to keep them in harm's way.
As for the Rafah crossing, Egypt has made clear that it is one way only. Yes to humanitarian aid going in, a firm no to Gaza's civilian population coming out. Are Egypt's concerns partly that bringing a large number of Palestinian refugees into Sinai might bring the war onto Egyptian territory, and it would be forced to respond?
Yes, this is what is perceived by the people. If you go out throughout the social media and the opinion pages in Egyptian newspapers, you will see this perception. But the main principle of no liquidation of the Palestinian cause or no evacuation of Palestinians from their land is the main prevailing language in Egypt.
With the focus of the fighting now in Gaza's south, there is some calm in the bombed-out thoroughfares of Gaza City. Time for those who are left there to reclaim what they can and bury their dead. Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is winning, but as these streets attest, it is a devastating battle, and there is still a long way to go. Diana Magne, Sky News, Jerusalem.
The Labour Party is standing by its candidate for the Rochdale by-election after saying he was completely wrong to have suggested that Israel had allowed the 7th of October massacre to go ahead in order to give it the green light to invade Gaza. Azhar Ali has apologised for his remarks, which he's described as deeply offensive, ignorant and false. But the Labour leader is facing growing pressure from those who want the party to drop its support for Mr Ali. Our political correspondent Rob Powell reports.
Labour's candidate for the coming Rochdale by-election in the spotlight for reportedly saying Israel allowed the October the 7th Hamas attacks to happen to justify going into Gaza. Azhar Ali hasn't disputed he made the remarks at a meeting last year, and he's apologised, saying Hamas's horrific terror attack was the responsibility of Hamas alone, and they are still holding hostages who must be released. I will urgently apologise to Jewish leaders for my inexcusable comments. Shadow Minister Lisa Nandy at an event with Azhar Ali today. The party's campaigning plans in the area have not changed, and speaking to Sky's Trevor Phillips, one Labour frontbencher said he would still be the candidate.
It's right that he has completely apologised now, and he himself said it was wrong to say it, and that's the right thing to do.
He will be your candidate in Rochdale?
In the upcoming by-election, yes, he will.
It was just last month that Labour suspended MP Kate Ossamore for comments about Gaza. Sir Keir Starmer made tackling anti-Semitism a priority for his leadership, and while it's too late for his party to pick another candidate for Rochdale, he could withdraw support.
Are you really telling me that because of a deadline, Labour should be asking people to vote for somebody who supports anti-Semitic conspiracy theories? I don't think that's a very good excuse. I think the reality is Labour should take the consequences of the decision to stand him as a candidate on the chin and recognise that they don't have an acceptable candidate for this election.
As for other parties in Rochdale, Reform UK said it was extraordinary that shadow frontbenchers were still campaigning for Azhar Ali, while the Workers' Party of Britain questioned why anyone would vote for him now. The Lib Dems were approached for comment, campaign groups called for action.
Jews are being accused of having murdered themselves in order to spill yet more blood in Gaza. It is a blood libel. It's obscene. There's no obvious reason why Azhar Ali should not be suspended.
For Sir Keir Starmer, there are no good options. If he ditches his candidate, he risks losing the seat. If he stands by him, as the party appears to be doing, then the attacks will keep on coming, and there's the danger of an embarrassing U-turn further down the line. Not for the first time in the last few days, this is a test of the Labour leader's ability to make a concrete decision and navigate a tricky political situation.
A new face, but an old argument for Labour. Once again, Sir Keir Starmer's political judgment under scrutiny. Rob Powell, Sky News in Westminster.
And here is the full list of candidates and the political parties they represent in the Rochdale by-election. Dozens of new allegations of abuse have emerged against NHS trusts after an investigation by Sky News and The Independent. One patient says she was raped multiple times, while another patient with a mental disorder became pregnant after sex with a staff member. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi has this report.
I was extremely distressed, really low, suicidal. I didn't want to wake up in the morning. I thought the world would be better off without me.
When Eleanor was admitted to a psychiatric unit, she was at her lowest. Eleanor is not her real name, and this is not her real voice. We're protecting her identity. She hoped the care she would receive would turn her life around. Instead, she says she was groomed and sexually abused by a member of staff.
I wasn't in a position to say no to a man who was powerful and who had authority over me. He had control over the medication I was prescribed. He could influence the care that I received. That was what was frightening. That's why I complied, because he had that much power over me.
Eleanor came forward after Freedom of Information requests made by Sky News and The Independent found that since 2019 there were nearly 20,000 new sexual assaults and harassment complaints involving patients and staff across more than 30 NHS trusts.
I was shocked, extremely shocked at the sheer scale, the sheer numbers, and these are just the numbers that have been reported.
Leeds and York Partnership NHS Foundation Trust, who were responsible for Eleanor's care, say As a trust, we take any allegations of abuse extremely seriously and have robust processes in place to deal with those when they arise. Joy was sexually abused as a young child. Her childhood trauma developed into problems with her mental health. She also says she was groped by a male patient while on a mixed ward. Our joint investigation with The Independent found since 2019 there have been more than 500 allegations of sexual assault or rape on mixed-sex wards or mixed spaces across more than 20 trusts. Joy believes the attack on her could have been prevented.
You've got all these people with all different problems in a mixed place. There's just no stopping anything that can happen.
But these are our most vulnerable people. They are the ones who need the most protection.
I honestly think people do care, and the staff do care, but I don't think there's money.
East London NHS Foundation Trust told Sky News Joy's allegations are deeply concerning and that all of ELFT's working-age adult wards are now single-sex. We encourage and support service users and staff to report all incidents of this nature to the police and via our incident reporting system so that full, independent and internal investigations can take place. Responding to our report, NHS England said that current sexual safety standards are guidance and that there are no mandatory standards. They added that trusts are expected to act in accordance with the law to safeguard patients. For Eleanor and Joy, the damage has been done, but they want to ensure other vulnerable patients are kept safe. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
And if you've been affected by any of the issues raised in that report by Ashish Joshi there, you can contact the Samaritans on the helpline number 116 123, or you can email them joe@samaritans.org. And for more on that story, you can scan the QR code on your screen right now to listen to Patient 11, Sky News and The Independent's new podcast. All episodes are available now wherever you get your podcasts from. A vigil for the murdered transgender teenager Brianna Ghey has been held on the anniversary of her death in Warrington. Brianna died after being stabbed 28 times by two 15-year-olds who have now been jailed. Her mother spoke at the vigil, describing her daughter as unique and joyful. Sky's Fraser Maud reports.
A year on from Brianna Ghey's murder, friends, family and well-wishers, many from the trans and LGBTQI+ communities, came together to pay their respects to a young woman so tragically and horrifically killed. Brianna's mother Esther spoke to them and thanked them for their support.
Brianna was an amazing, unique and joyful teenager. I will be forever thankful that I was lucky enough to spend 16 years with her. She taught me so much and gave me so much happiness and love. If there's one piece of advice that I can give to any parent, it would be to hug your children tight and never stop telling them that you love them.
Some travelled miles to be here.
I didn't know Brianna, sorry, but I feel so much love for her.
And I've got friends that are a part of the LGBTQ+ community, so it means a lot to support that kind of thing.
It just felt like it's just the right thing to do.
Yeah, to show solidarity as well, because we're both trans as well, and I just think it's important to recognise stuff like this.
These are the last images of Brianna leaving home and taking the bus to meet up with her killers. Today, with the pair now serving life sentences for their brutal and sadistic behaviour, Brianna's friends spoke of the young life they had ended.
A year ago today, you were taken from us. You have had so many things to celebrate this year. Your 17th birthday, leaving school, prom, which we all know that you would have had the pinkest and sparkliest dress ever, and starting college.
Brianna's death has sparked a campaign for more mental health support in schools. Brianna's family say they hope this vigil will allow her to see just how much she was loved. They also hope that this will be the beginning of a legacy for Brianna, for safety for young people, online and in society. Nothing can replace Brianna in the hearts of those who knew her, But today's show of love and support may provide some comfort and a reassurance that her legacy will live on. Fraser Maud, Sky News, Warrington.
4 boys aged between 12 and 14 have been arrested on suspicion of rape in Rochdale. In a statement, Greater Manchester Police said at around 6 p.m. on Saturday, officers were called to reports of a rape in Newbold, Rochdale. 4 boys aged 12, 13, 14 and 14 have been arrested on suspicion of rape and remain in police custody. The victim is currently being supported by specialist officers. The departure of the Royal Navy's aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales to lead the largest NATO drill since the Cold War has been postponed. An issue with a propeller was found on the £3 billion warship just before setting sail from Portsmouth. It's the second malfunction in 18 months on the vessel, which was due to replace its sister ship, HMS Queen Elizabeth, on the exercise after she also broke down last week. King Charles has made his first public appearance since his cancer diagnosis was announced. The King was seen smiling and waving as he attended church with the Queen in Sandringham this morning. His appearance follows a statement released late last night, thanking all those who sent him messages of support. Well, let's take you to the Super Bowl now, the biggest annual event in American sport, where the cultural spectacle surrounding it is at least as important as the game itself. This is the scene live in Las Vegas, where fans are already starting to pour into the stadium. And this year, thanks perhaps to a sprinkle of Taylor Swift mania, the game is expected to draw in its biggest ever audience here in the UK too. Sky's Matthew Thompson reports.
Don't be fooled. It may look like we're somewhere in the heart of America, but no. This is northwest London, where the Wembley Stallions American football team have been playing for 10 years.
When we first started, we only had a men's team. Since then, we've had women's teams that have won national championships. We've got under-16s, under-19s team. So, you know, getting in at the grassroots, and if we can have more teams that are doing that, it's only going to grow the popularity.
It's got a great grassroots level. It's like one of those things that grassroots sports does have, that if you know about it, suddenly it's aware, it's everywhere. If you don't know about it, it feels like it's weird. But there's well over 100 teams in the country. The universities play it.
Fast as it may be growing, though, American football remains something of a niche interest here in Britain, at least for 364 days of the year. The one exception hardly needs an introduction.
Going to throw it as far as his arm can take it.
It's the Super Bowl.
And the Kansas City Chiefs have won Super Bowl 57!
Even if much of Britain's interest lies less in the sporting spectacle than in the showbiz. And this year, it's all about America's latest power couple, the NFL's Posh and Becks, Taylor Swift and boyfriend Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. Largely as a result of Swift mania, tonight's Super Bowl is expected to get its biggest ever UK audience.
I think it'll certainly be the most watched Super Bowl. I think the association with Taylor Swift, with Travis Kelce, will be high on people's agendas. But I think for all those sort of football fans, they'll also be really keen to see a sporting spectacle.
And what better way to whet your Super Bowl appetite than with a life-sized Taylor Swift Super Bowl cake? Baked by Walsall woman Lara Mason to mark the occasion, it's racked up millions of views on social media. Cake aside, there's much to recommend the Super Bowl as a spectacle. Glitz, glamour, high-octane sport, it's all there. That is, if you can stay awake late enough to watch it. Matthew Thompson, Sky News.
What I want to know is, when do they cut the cake? Let's get all the latest sports news now with David.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
"2023 saw Rebecca Welsh become the first female Premier League referee and Sam Allison become the second ever black referee in the league. They both came from PGMOL's referee development group. dedicated to pushing talented officials into reaching the highest level of the game. The next crop of referees are hoping to break through to the big time, including former Stevenage player Farai Halam.
It's amazing to see Sam and Rebecca to go and do something which hasn't been done for a while, or in Bex's case has never been done before. I grew up on a council estate in East London. I didn't know anyone that refereed. I played 4 years full-time football, kind of leaving school, which was like my childhood dream. Came to an end, as all kind of careers do at some point. I kind of stumbled into refereeing. Didn't think it would lead to anything, and yeah, 8 years on, to be officiating in the professional game, to be a PGMOL official is just like mind-blowing. It's fantastic. It's given me like a new lease of life. Historically, there's maybe been a bit of a stigma around refereeing of, oh, I'm not sure it's for me, I wouldn't do that. I think we're seeing refereeing changing, like massively for the better. People forget that referees are football fans themselves. Like, we all love the game. As you said, the amount of time we commit is beyond what people probably on the outside ever understand.
Emily Heaslip refereed last year's Women's FA Cup final and credits the group with her success so far.
It's very unified, if you like, and we're all together, we're all on the same journey, and it doesn't matter what background you're from, you know, what sex you are, to be involved within football. It's talent related, and as we know, the women's game is growing very, very fast. Naturally, some scrutiny will follow, and it's a very opinionated sport, and everyone's got views and opinions on lots of decisions that officials take. But I think camps like we've got, the content that we've got involved, will only ever support and help develop officials, and the better the officiating comes, the less, in theory, scrutiny that we get.
This is kind of the training ground, let's say, for us in terms of being able to get stuck into the technical side of what we do, discussing match incidents together and being quite open and honest in those conversations, but also that support staff that's around us. We've got psychologists, we've got physiologists. These days are really kind of where we learn our trade, so that come 3 o'clock on a Saturday we can go out there and go and deliver. We've got the laws of the game that we have to apply, work within, but within that it gives us that little bit of flexibility to use our personality at times in the right moments to manage an individual or a situation, again with the idea of having a positive impact on it.
Referees in the group have the chance to be mentored by Premier League officials like Anthony Taylor, and there's an emphasis on deeper football knowledge, delivered by Football Insights coach Irfan Kari.
My role as Football Insights coach is to help coach and mentor our match officials to develop a deeper understanding of the game. If we could understand how a team plays, how a team sets up its shape, what it does in possession, out possession, transition, does the team press high up the pitch, does it play out from the back, developing through the thirds, does the game that the referee is going to referee, is it going to be a toe-to-toe game, or is it going to be a game where one team dominates the ball and the other team sits in a mid or low block? If we can get our officials to understand that going into the game, it's going to help with their positioning and movement.
The ride to becoming a Premier League referee is a tough one, with guaranteed sacrifice. Which of the next batch will push themselves to the top? Chris Reedy, Sky Sports.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by John Stevens, political editor at the Daily Mirror, and Anna Soubry, barrister and former government minister. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Metro, their headline, Unhinged, Biden versus Trump in War of Words. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.
To make a 1-minute video about ourselves and our passion for sports and our support for Team GB.
And what is your sport? Do you have a sport?
Well, I like many sports, especially badminton, swimming and football.
Have a look at your video that won you a place as a mascot, because 20,000 people and you were one of those that got selected. That's incredible. Let's have a quick look.
Hello Team GB, my name is Alice and I'm 8 this year. Here are a few reasons why I'd be the perfect mini mascot for the team. I have a deep passion for sports and especially badminton. I love the feeling of competing and the joy of teamwork. Being a mini mascot would let me share that passion with everyone.
Yeah, we're over the moon. Yeah, when we learned about she got selected as a mini mascot, and yeah, we're very proud of her.
And tell me about your kit, because you're wearing your mini mascot's kit today. It's all very smart.
Yeah, we collected it from where we needed to do our photo shoot.
So you've done a photo shoot? Yeah. And how was that?
It was really exciting.
So you met all the mini mascots, there they are, and yeah, there you are on the end. Did you find it a little bit embarrassing? I always find photo shoots a little bit embarrassing.
Well,
were you cool with it all?
Well, I was really nervous at the start, but when I got into it, I felt like it was really nice.
Now, you told me a secret in the break that you've known about this for a long time, and it was supposed to be a secret. Yeah. So you've known since November. Could you keep it a secret?
Well, I could keep some of it a secret.
You told me that you couldn't keep it a secret. You'd be rubbish on Bake Off.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. The head of NATO has issued a rare rebuke to Donald Trump for suggesting he would let Russia attack members of the alliance who don't pay enough for defence. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has dismissed concerns about his plans to send troops into the last remaining designated safe zone in Gaza. A Labour by-election candidate has apologised after reportedly suggesting that Israel allowed Hamas to carry out its October the 7th attack to give it the green light to invade Gaza. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with John Stevens, political editor at the Daily Mirror, and Anna Soubry, barrister and former government minister. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Metro leads on the war of words between Joe Biden and Donald Trump after the former president's controversial comments about Russia and defence spending. On the front page of the Financial Times, a new poll finds that more Americans trust Donald Trump to handle the US economy over Joe Biden. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is braced for a double budget blow as the UK is set for an inflation rise and a possible recession. That on the eye. On the Daily Mail, Jewish groups condemn Labour for standing by a candidate who blamed Israel for the Hamas atrocity. The Mirror has an exclusive on the story of Alex Batty, the British boy who went missing for 6 years after going on holiday with his mother and grandfather. The Sun leads on King Charles's first public appearance since revealing he has cancer. Grant Shapps pledges to end what he calls poisonous woke culture, which he says is distracting the military from its job of protecting the nation. That's on The Express. The Guardian has a story on international students accused of cheating on English language test, pushing to clear their names 10 years on. On the front of the Times, bosses of water companies that commit criminal acts of pollution will be banned from receiving bonuses. And a devoted football fan flies 8,000 miles from China to watch the Bolton Wanderers, only to find out that the match was cancelled. That's on the front page of the Daily Star. Will he have got a refund on his air ticket as well? A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by John Stevens and Anna Soubry. Welcome to you both. I know you're a footy fan. Would you travel 8,000 miles?
Not even for the mighty pies. No. It was a waterlogged pitch.
Yes, waterlogged pitch, yes.
At Bolton. And anyway, it's a bit tough, though. 8,000. Not that.
I don't know how much the air ticket costs. Anyway, let's move on. We'll start with the front page of the Metro. John, take us into this. The word in quotes there, unhinged, and this is Joe Biden's description of Donald Trump. For why?
Yes, it feels like this is a flashback that we've got an old copy of the Metro from 4 years ago. We're doing these stories again about Donald Trump and making these threats and NATO. And we know that NATO has this spending target where countries who are a member are meant to spend 2% of GDP, the size of their economy, on defence. And we know that quite a lot of countries don't do that. We were looking at the figures just now. I think it's about 7 of the 31 countries in NATO managed that in 2022. And so you can see why Donald Trump's annoyed, thinking, well, America spends loads of money on defence, and these countries in Europe that run the risk of being invaded by Putin aren't spending 2% on their armies, on their air forces, etc., etc. So you can see why he might be annoyed.
He's always said this, though, hasn't he?
He's always said this, but he's now gone one step further. Maybe it's because we're in an election campaign and he wants to appeal to his base, but he was speaking at a rally in South Carolina and he was telling this tale which possibly made up or exaggerated, knowing him.
I can't believe
saying that some leader of a president of a large country in NATO had said to him, "Sir, if we don't if we got invaded by Putin and we didn't spend the 2% target on defence, would you defend us?" And Donald Trump said, "No, the opposite. I'd say to Putin, get in there, invade, do whatever the hell you want." And so you can see why lots of NATO countries and the Secretary-General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, has said, well, this is almost daring Putin to invade these member states.
It's shocking.
Has he crossed a line?
Of course, but then he always does. Unhinged, that's generous. I mean, it's dangerous stuff. I mean, it's also, it's the usual combination of Trump, that there's a little element, a grain of, as John was explaining, but actually you spend, I mean, we spend over 2% just on our defences. You spend that as part of NATO, that's the rule. And then you don't give money to NATO, you contribute by your troops and on your personnel and also your equipment, blah, blah, blah. And of course, he makes it out, because he said, oh, if you don't pay the bill, well, there isn't a NATO bill that you... So, you know, it's the twisting of truth, and it's that dog whistle to his hardcore supporters, and he gets away with it. But this time, I thought the reaction from the White House couldn't have been firmer and harder, saying unhinged, which is actually, he's pretty bonkers.
But, John, it's that kernel of truth that you've sort of both articulated that really plays to his supporters. Yeah. And they will say, well, why should America pay to protect these countries when they're not paying their fair share?
I mean, there's definitely a point there, but the whole point of NATO is it's meant to be a deterrent. It is saying to anyone, whether that's Putin, whether that's China or whoever, if you invade one of the members of NATO, we will all stand together and we will stand against you. I mean, so if you have a chink in that, there isn't a point of NATO. It's meant to be deterrent.
And this idea, he actually did say, well, I mean, my view is, Putin can go and invade them. I mean, obviously, you found Spain doesn't pay its 2%. And the idea that, Putin's going to invade Spain for the birds, of course, is this point that NATO's so important in protecting people, keeping world peace.
And John, what about this point that he has actually put NATO troops in harm's way. He's compromised their safety by saying this.
Well, this is the idea that is a deterrent, and if they don't think it's a deterrent, then it's possible that someone would try and attack. I think that clearly if it did come to it, you would hope, God hope, that that wouldn't be the case. And you really do hope he is just talking this sort of language because he is in the run-up to a presidential campaign and wants to show off. I think what people are worried about, though, is will he stand firmly with Ukraine?
Yes.
And we know that over the last few years, you know, loads of European countries, the UK, have pumped billions of pounds into Ukraine to be able so that they can fight for themselves. And we know that America has contributed some money, but there is a worry that if Donald Trump did get back in, would he stand with Ukraine? And also, would we just go back to all of this chaos again, where we're kind of just waking up every morning waiting to see what stupid thing Donald Trump has tweeted overnight, and then everyone's going ballistic? I mean, it is just horrible. It is just, nightmare scenario.
And he is a Putin apologist as well, that has to be said. And that's, again, why it's also concerning.
But the chances of him getting back into power seem to be increasing. If we turn to the FT, he's got an 11-point poll lead over Joe Biden, and the population, the American population, seem to think that he's more trustworthy with the economy, although Joe Biden has performed quite well in that area.
Yeah, he has.
Yeah, and this is the strange thing. You look back at the figures of how well the American economy has done in the last couple of years, and you compare them to the figures in the UK, where our economy has been stagnating. The economy has been growing. Things have been getting better. You look at the IMF forecast for the coming years. It says for the coming year, the IMF predicts that the US economy will increase by 2.1%. The forecast for the UK was just 0.7%. And so you just think, if you want Team Biden and you just thought, well, we are managing to improve the economy, what can we do to convince people to vote for us? But I think perhaps where the alarm bells will be going after this is the UK, and in Downing Street thinking, well, if Joe Biden is struggling to get re-elected where he's got the economy growing, then I think it's going to be a bit of a hard ask for Rishi Sunak to get re-elected when the economy isn't growing here, it's just going flatline.
What's the issue then? What's the crux of it, Anna? Is that people's perception is different to the reality?
It's a difficult one to understand, because they actually say that Trump's got an 11-point lead on stewardship of the economy, so never mind everything else. And it is perverse and bizarre. And the report in the FT actually is obviously linking to what's happened over the weekend with this criticism of Biden and genuine concerns about his mental abilities and so on and so forth. So I find the whole thing quite extraordinary, because there are genuinely otherwise sensible, smart people in America genuinely want Trump back as president. And yet, frankly, we sit here, and it's not because we're sort of, liberal metropolitan leads or anything like that. Not in my case, for sure, and indeed in yours. But in all seriousness, you just look at it like the rest of the world and you think, how on earth can this great country of the United States of America even dally and have any dalliance again with Trump after everything that happened, and especially what happened after he lost the election?
And you do look at Joe Biden and you look at his comments this week, and every time he speaks, I just do feel slightly nervous. And you think, back when he ran for election last time, because of COVID, he was able to do that election campaign basically from his basement, being able to zoom into, like everyone else, zooming in on their computer to meetings and doing rallies. If he has got to traipse all the way around America, it's been really difficult for him. And you just think, what possible slip-ups might we have in the next few months?
You mentioned the British economy there, brought into that previous story, but if we have a look at the Eye, their headline, Hunt braced for double budget blow this week. Anna.
Yeah, so this is a series of short bites that are on the front there of the Eye, and it says the official figures are going to show a slight increase in the rate of inflation. Bad news for Sunak and Hunt. Possible recession. I think it's actually described as a technical recession, but again, it's a bad headline for them. Then you've got Rishi Sunak again promising that he is going to cut people's taxation, which everybody would think, we'd welcome that because we are so now heavily taxed unfortunately, under a Conservative government. But on the other hand, people aren't stupid and they know, things are falling apart in public services. So how are you going to afford that? Then we hear that in any event, Jeremy Hunt's headroom, as they put it, is not as great as they thought it was in the autumn statement. And then there's a sort of a promise on how to get people going and being able to get onto the housing ladder. And it's a mixed bag of stuff, this. I think what this is also saying is that there is a chance still of a May election. I think that the Conservatives are still rolling the pitch for May, as well as keeping the options open on October. And anything could happen in that respect. But we are coming, 3 weeks' time, isn't it, the next budget? And so there's going to be more of this sort of stuff on the front page.
Do you think this is sort of testing the waters?
Well, I think that clearly the polls haven't moved over the last few months. Whatever has happened, whether it was announcements at Tory Party conference or the last autumn statement when they were talking about cutting national insurance and actually did bring in the cut, that hasn't done anything to move the polls. I think if you suddenly saw a jolt in the polls, they might think, well, this is our chance, let's go for it. But I think even if you had spectacular tax cuts unveiled in that budget in 3 weeks' time, number one, voters aren't stupid, as Anna says. I think they're not stupid because they will realise this has been done because it's an election and people will think you're trying to bribe us. And number two, I think it doesn't quite recognise the impact on people's finances they've seen over the last few years. And so when they took 2 percentage points off national insurance, the average person that saved £450 a year. I don't know if you've still got a mortgage or you've had to renew your mortgage recently. My mortgage is up more than £400 a month. And so the idea that over a year you're going to save me £400, for most people, that's just not going to touch the sides.
They were not stupid. People are not stupid.
John and Anna, thank you very much for the moment. We are going to take a break, much more to discuss when we come back, including that the King has made his first public appearance since revealing he has cancer. We'll discuss that and other stories making the papers. Do stay with us.
The accident happened over a year and a few months ago, and over that time I've been trying to engage with TfL. I've been trying to have a conversation about what happened in terms of mapping out the learnings, because acceptance of failures leads to innovation. That's the point. And the fact that I have had no response, no engagement, no apology, and now a formal denying of liability, of responsibility, for me, that leaves me no other option than to say, OK, what else can I do? And legal action is what I now have to resort to. I was tipped off that there was an incident on the 26th of December at the end of last year where a gentleman fell onto the tracks at Stratford, which is also a terminus station, just like High Barnet. And this man got run over by 4 trains. And because it's an end station, that means 8 times. Of course, that gentleman didn't survive, but that prompted me to, be resolved in this and saying, we need to do something about this.
You're taking this on. I mean, you've got a lot to cope with already. As we said, you lost your arm and your leg in this, and you look great, but you're bearing the scars of that physically and emotionally. When I travel on the Tube network, I'm standing at Westminster Station in front of glass barriers, and there are quite a lot of those at the modern tube stations, glass barriers between the passengers on the platform and the tube tracks. You think, why aren't these everywhere? And it's not like TfL haven't got any money. They're expected to make £79 million profit this financial year.
What I find disappointing is there is emphasis on what I would call PR stunts and saying, oh, for Fashion Week, we'll change Bond Street into Burberry Street. That costs money, and I don't think it's necessary. I read an article about putting cardboard steering wheels on DLR trains because that could be fun for the passengers, but that's not what we care about. We care about trains being on time, carriages being tidy, clean, and being safe.
Being safe on a tube and when you're on the platform.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview, still with me, John Stevens, political editor at the Daily Mirror, and Anna Soubry, barrister and former government minister. Let's have a look at the Mail front page, and it's this story about Jewish groups being critical of Sir Keir Starmer because Labour are standing by a by-election candidate in Rochdale who's blamed Israel for the Hamas atrocity. Your thoughts, Anna?
Well, I think they've been very clear that they've expected a full apology from him, and he made that apology very quickly. But everybody has to, if I may say, understand that because there are 3 by-elections on Thursday. But when you have a by-election, or any election, as soon as your name's gone in as a candidate, you can't withdraw. So as much as I've no doubt Keir Starmer will be very happy to boot him out, he can't do that anyway, because once you've been nominated, you're there and it goes in front of the electorate, even if you do no campaigning at all. But clearly it's an embarrassment. Yes, he's apologised, but I don't know whether it would make any difference, that by-election in Rochdale. Obviously, there's a full slate of candidates and we have to be careful because the electoral law is very keen that we don't over-talk in our broadcast tonight about one candidate and not mention everybody else.
And on that point, we do have a graphic naming
so
all of the other candidates.
And I've deliberately not named
We'll
it.
bring up on screen.
But it's...
There it is. That's all the other candidates.
That Rochdale one's the end of the month, by the way. It's Wellingborough on and Kingswood on Thursday, and then this one in Rochdale's the end of the month.
It's the end of the month. But in any event, they can't now change. You can't change the candidate. And the only thing that can change an election is if, sadly, a candidate dies, and then the whole election is scrapped and you start again. But in this instance, Labour's they're tied to him.
John, how difficult a position is this for the Labour Party, bearing in mind the history and with anti-Semitism within the party?
I think it's really hard, and this headline's referring to Keir Starmer said repeatedly in the last few months about how he has changed the Labour Party. And so when you do have something like this come up, it is tricky, and you've seen the Tory party today really hammering Labour on this. They want to kind of get out there this message, and they are looking at the possibility of losing 2 by-elections on Thursday. And so being able to say that is miserable, but look at what's happening in the Labour Party, you can see why that benefits them.
It won't make a scrap of difference, I would have thought, on Thursday in those 2 by-elections. Actually, I think Labour's real problem is increasingly going to be about its stance on Gaza, because I think increasingly people are saying that enough is enough, and the calls for a ceasefire, I think, are going to become louder, and it will put more pressure on Labour.
It's certainly an area we've seen, councillors standing down on that position.
Yeah, but I think it's the public. I think people are really, really concerned about if they're going to Rafah like Israel says it's going to go. And I know Biden said this thing about, well, we want to make sure civilians are safe. But I think you just get this feeling amongst people as well as politicians. They're really worried now.
Let's just have a quick look at the front page of The Sun. The King there smiling and waving, the first time since we've seen him since that diagnosis was made public.
Yeah, and so we obviously know the King's got cancer, but we don't know what type. There's lots of unanswered questions. And so I think a lot of people who will be particularly worried will be pleased to see him out there looking quite chirpy, and Camilla in the background looking quite mischievous as normal. She does, that grin on her face.
He's doing well. We wish him well.
Yes, we do.
Absolutely.
Thank you both, John and Anna, for taking us through the papers. We'll see you in the 11 o'clock hour. Let's take a look at the weather for you in the meantime.